You know, you get a little bigger. We got a little bigger since the storm, and so we got to make it pay off.
Through it all, the day of the tornado rarely leaves the thoughts of Crable and his workers, and out of destruction comes progress and growth.
It could happen again. No, I think we're always aware of it. I think we'll be a little bit more aware of it now. We did make provisions in the store here, too, that if it would happen again. But I don't know if you'd ever would have a safe place necessarily. But no, you think about it. As you come back, you think about it, because this wouldn't have been here, you know, without the tornado.
In this, the toughest year of Hesston's existence, other businesses are rebuilding. And soon, the heart of Hesston, its business district, will once again become whole. Chuck Weber, Eyewitness News, downtown Hesston.
I'm Linda Hammond. It's been a long year for Carol and Ron Peters. Their decorating center is back together again now, a far cry from the scene 1 year ago. The business they had owned for 15 years was gone in a matter of seconds. Carpet samples were found on neighbors' front steps after the tornado ripped through town, and even invoices and other papers were found as far away as Manhattan, Kansas.
Even after the tornado, we were in our basement at home, and we're debating whether to come back and even check to see if the store was okay. And half of the family didn't want to come. We said, oh, come on, let's just all jump in the car and go see. And couldn't believe it when we got over here, because tornadoes don't hit us. I mean, we have sirens, but they don't hit us. But it did. And did a lot of damage.
Carol and Ron reopened this decorating store on August 3rd. As you may have guessed, most of their customers were victims of the tornado, people who needed new carpet, new blinds, or new curtains. So as you can imagine, business for this home decorating store was booming.
And you hurt for everyone that comes in. The first thing we did was we set up a discount policy and said anybody who's repairing storm damage automatically gets certain discounts, because you're going to give them all of the contractors' discounts on wallpaper and paint and on carpet, no matter how small or how large their job, just because we're not out to take advantage of people at that time. They're hurting enough at that time. And we knew what it was like, because we were right in the middle of it, too.
The day the tornado hit is still etched in their memories. The Peters say they will never forget it. But even still, sometimes it seems like it never really happened.
All of a sudden, I just thought, did it really happen? It's just, sometimes it's like a nightmare. Like it was just a bad dream.
Tomorrow, March 13th, will bring sad thoughts, but there is never a day, they say, that goes by that they don't remember how lucky they are. After all, they have survived the worst tornado in Kansas history.
We've cried a lot of tears during the last year. When that storm book came out, I made it halfway through the book, and then I stopped because I was just tired of crying. And I'm ready to get on with some other things in life. I don't want to go over it again.
We're just as happy as can be.
Linda Hammond, Eyewitness News, Hesston.
1 year ago, this entire cul-de-sac was flattened. Some families chose not to rebuild, but most did. So right now, let's go to Kim Setti with one of the many families who rebuilt not only their homes, but their lives after the tragedy. Here's their story.
Eugene, would you believe that the cookie jar came through okay?
The twister tore apart Bob and Marcella Diller's house of the past 34 years, and cleaning it up made them set their priorities in a hurry.
One thing I'm glad of is that we got our family albums out, our pictures of our grandchildren and everything, and our children, and I'm thankful for that, because those are things that can't be replaced.
Is that what we sing to you when you go to sleep? Sure.
Today, the grandkids themselves visit Grandpa and Grandma Diller in their new home, built on the same foundation of the original. But it's not the same.
It wasn't easy. Like I was telling, we kind of had to get used to the new house. It was just like, you know, we were moving into a complete different house. It was the same location.
In fact, Marcella kept pictures from the day after the twister all the way up to the completion of the new home in October.
You just feel really lonely for your old house, actually. I guess it's partly because of the way it was taken from us.
It's just after the tornado hit.
This home video was taken just moments after the tornado tore apart Vince and Rachel Martin's home. With no basement, they all huddled in the inner hallway for safety.
I'm trying to taking some pictures and getting things.
But the Martins decided they didn't want to rebuild their house on the same spot it had been. Instead, they moved their things from the east side of Hesston to the west side and moved into this house.
And though they've moved, that night will never be forgotten.
Because the tornado was still there and couldn't get out, and the stuff went in my eye.
It's left a lasting lesson with everyone involved.
That could have been our last day. Well, any day now, you know, could be the last day. We just don't know. So we want to live each day as though it might be our last.
Kim Setti, Eyewitness News, Hesston.
In just a couple of minutes, we'll go back to the studio to join Merrill Teller for a look at just how strong those tornadoes were on March 13th. And we'll offer some tips on tornado safety. Stay with us.
Well, welcome back, and we're going to kind of take a look back now from a meteorological standpoint on the Hesston tornado. And joining me right now is John Davies. Some of you may remember John. He is a meteorologist and used to be on the air here in Wichita and also worked for the Weather Channel for a while, and then decided to come back home and work in the family business in Pratt.
That's right.
So he handles that. But John is also an avid tornado chaser.
That is right, Merrill. I find it very fascinating to get out in the field and see these natural wonders develop. This last year was just an incredible year for tornadoes around the state.
You, how often do you get to go out and do that?
Oh, with my business, it's a little difficult to get away sometimes, but I like to try to get out 4 or 5 or 6 times a year if there's severe weather in the area.
What was your first clue on March 13th, 1990, that it was time to hit the road?
Well, we saw all these towering clouds develop to the south of Pratt, and it looked like to me there was a rather large thunderstorm developing, so I left work about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and took my camera with me, and I followed the thunderstorm for about an hour and a half before it produced the tornado, and I'd say after about an hour of following the thunderstorm, I figured it was going to produce a tornado. But when I saw it actually put down a tornado just to the northeast of Pretty Prairie, I was totally unprepared for what I saw. It was the largest tornado I've ever seen. It was very awesome is the only way to describe that.
As we've seen many, many times in a lot of video. And in fact, we have several different pieces of video from several different people who had different perspectives on the storm as it went along.
That's right.
Where are we starting off here, John?
Right here we're starting off with a video by Bill Hughey of Hesston. He's looking southwest from the west edge of Hesston. The tornado is probably about 4 miles distant at this point. Earlier, near Burton, it had been about a half-mile wide, but here it had narrowed to about 200, maybe 300 yards wide, and it maintained that general width as it approached Hesston. But as we watch, we'll see the tornado get larger. Now, what's interesting about this video is that Mr. Hughey is right in the path of the tornado. The tornado destroyed his house. In fact, there really wasn't anything left of the house above the foundation level. The floor was even gone. You could look down into the basement. And as he was filming this, or videoing it, I guess would be the correct term, he and his wife were discussing whether they should get in the car and drive away to Newton or somewhere or go to the basement. But he and his wife and kids were in the basement. They took a good spot under the stairway and were uninjured, even though their house was totally destroyed. So that was a good way to go.
So they knew the right things to do.
They knew the right
with
thing
the
to
storm
do.
coming.
They very definitely
They headed
did.
downstairs. Now, these, I think, are probably familiar to most of our viewers. The sequence that we're going to be looking at next. This was probably the first video that came out from the Hesston portion of the storm.
Yes, this was taken by Dean Allison of Hesston. And where we're picking it up, the tornado is actually moving into the west edge of Hesston. We're looking northwest at it from the southeast part of town. And we'll see more debris fly as the tornado moves into the town of Hesston here. In fact, Mr. Hughey's house was probably destroyed just about at this time. Down over at the lower right-hand corner, we can see a water tower. That's the Hesston Manufacturing Corporation water tower. The tornado passes just south of that and just to the north of the downtown area. And here we can see debris really beginning to fly. We can see roofs off of buildings, houses, very large pieces of debris flying. In fact, at the right center, we'll see a cloud come off the ground right there. What that is cement out of a bin. It's powdered cement, several tons of it, that was sucked up into the tornado. The tornado right now is passing through the downtown area or just to the north of it. Winds in the tornado at this point were rated somewhat over 260 miles per hour, which would give it F5 intensity, according to the National Weather Service. And that's pretty close to as intense as a tornado ever gets.
The strongest storms only account for, as I recall, about 2%.
That is right.
Of all tornadoes.
Those are violent tornadoes.
Yeah, the most violent. So this was quite... And then later on, it turned into even a more interesting situation with the two storms coming together. But the video is just amazing as we watch the one tornado in the foreground, which is the Hesston Tornado.
That is right.
And it actually gets drawn into the other one, doesn't it?
Let's take a look at the video and see what's going on. This video was taken by Olin Harris in courtesy of Ernest Harris, his father to the north of Newton. Here, the tornado in the foreground, like Merrill said, is the weakening Hesston Tornado. And while that Hesston Tornado was going through the town of Hesston, another tornado touched down just to the northeast of Hesston. And we can kind of see that other tornado behind the rope-like Hesston Tornado that's going northward there. And this is about 3 miles northeast of Hesston. What we're actually seeing is the Hesston Tornado roping out very thin here and passing around the north side of the second tornado. And then they actually merge at this point. And there's certainly some indication that the merger of these two tornadoes contributed to a very intense F5 tornado a little bit further on, just to the southeast of Gossel. Okay, the two tornadoes have merged at this point, and now we're going to see a very large funnel form. It looks more like a wall cloud that's kind of plopping down to the ground.
Just a huge cloud coming down to the ground. You almost can't tell there's a tornado in there.
It's a very interesting video here, and I know a lot of meteorologists are taking a look at this because I think this is the first time this type of event has really been documented like this. But as I was saying, this led to a much stronger tornado just southeast of Gossel that had winds in excess of 300 miles per hour, and that is very rare.
And Dr. Fujita has said that it's probably in the top 0.1%?
Something like that. Dr. Ted Fujita of the University of Chicago.
That's really astounding. Well, I guess the question that, of course, comes to mind after watching all these spectacular pictures is, what do you do when the next morning comes and it's for your area? And we have a few tornado tips for you to just kind of start to place in your mind, as we found out last year. It can happen anywhere. It can happen anytime. And if you're at your office, you know, in Kansas, tornadoes occur most often between 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 7 o'clock in the evening. And so that means people are going to be home or are going to be at the office very often at those hours. Of course, you want to stay away from windows. That pretty well goes for wherever you are. If you're in an office, if you're at school, you want to stay away from parts of the building that have large and not well-supported roofs. And, of course, you want to get to a basement or an interior hallway as much to the center of the building as possible. If you're at home, it pretty much goes the same. Get to the basement if possible. Stay as centrally located in your basement as possible. And if you have some heavy furniture you can get under, that would be a good idea. And if you're out driving, and we saw a lot of pictures of people who stopped and watched the tornado go by from out in their cars, if it's close and you can't stop and watch it, you want to get out of your car because that can be one of the most deadly places to be.
That's right. You don't want to get surprised in your car by any means.
We were very fortunate that we had, as of course, the only 2 deaths associated with the whole thing. And I can remember back to Wichita Falls, Texas, back in 1979 when about 27 people were killed in cars out of about 42 total. So that certainly is not a very good place to be. I thank John for bringing all that terrific video with you. And we keep our fingers crossed that we don't see the same type of day again in this spring of 1991. But we always remember it can happen, and it can happen any day. Roger, back to you.
Earlier tonight, we showed you the site where the Mennonite Disaster Service was started in Hesston just over 40 years ago. When we return, we'll go back to Hesston for a look into the future of that important community helper and provider. Hesston's downtown that was wiped out by the storm has remained dormant for the past year, but recently work began on a project to rebuild there. Shelley Hansel tells us about the irony involved in the building project.
For the past 365 days, These workers and many like them have been busy rebuilding the shattered lives of many Hesston residents.
Nail the other one in all the way up. Catch every stud that it passes.
But now they focus their energy toward building a new home base for a group that helped many through the destructive tragedy. This block, which was leveled by the March 13th tornado, will be the site for the new state headquarters of Mennonite Disaster Service. Many say it's only fitting that MDS build their new headquarters in Hesston. After all, that's where the group began more than 40 years ago.
I started with a little Sunday school class here in 1950 and went to Wichita with the sandbag, and that's how they got started right here in this town. That's why we wanted it right back here at Hesston. And when I went to see the mayor, he said, we can't let you get out of Hesston. So here we are.
The framework of the new building made the perfect backdrop for a special presentation ceremony last week. Officials from Dillon's and Hearth Publishing presented a combined donation of more than $26,000 to Mennonite Disaster Service. MDS volunteers say the money will help them get started in their new location.
We want to show our Hesston that this building here won't be making money like that feed mill, like the journal office and the restaurant. We'll show you that, but we'll show you love in action.
Love in action that has been captured by Hearth Publishing's book, The Year of the Storms.
About half the photos in the book are along the 120 miles of the Hesston tornado, beginning in Reno County, as you know, and going up to Marion County.
That book is a moving tribute to the strength of people in the face of adversity, particularly the strength that comes from cooperation and the desire to serve one another.
In the face of adversity, this town has learned at least one thing. Behind those dark clouds that brought death and destruction 1 year ago, there is a silver lining.
I would think that one that many of us have learned is that just about anything that gets thrown at us, somehow or the other, the people of this community, certainly not only by themselves with the help of a lot of other people, but we will not just survive it, but we will survive it well.
Shelley Hansel, Eyewitness News, Hesston.
When we return, some final thoughts. In this report, we don't want to in any way diminish the tragedy that befell many others outside the Hesston community. Our hearts go out to the Fisher family of Burton. Their strength and faith will never be erased from our minds. And we want to recognize the missionary spirit of Ruth Voth, who touched the lives of many. Roger?
1 year is not time enough to recover from such tragedy. Families in Burton, Haven, Hesston, Yoder, Castleton, Gossel, and Pretty Prairie know that all too well. It is amazing that businesses and families were able to accomplish as much as they have in the past 12 months. But then again, we would expect nothing less of the people of Kansas. Thanks for being with us.
Look at that other front. It's amazing. Look at that. It's right by the big funnel. It is touched down. It is coming down. This is amazing, but it's fairly safe, mainly because it looks like it's going up. It's going back up into the sky. Well, on second thought, look at that though. I just saw a car go by on the highway. Cows are moving and birds are flying. Wow. It's incredible. Hope this will all turn out on videotape though. Yeah, record is on, Rachel. Okay. Oh, look at that. Look, that one looks like the wind has touched down. Wow, that's amazing.